Eusebius said, we read it, so I'm not going to read it again. You can see the last episode or read the life of Constantine. Eusebius said, Constantine told him what happened in the dream with an oath, right? With an oath. Doesn't that sound a little strange to you? For someone who had a dream about Jesus and conquered with a sign. And redefine Christian doctrine in ways that are required belief. This oath. Yeah, no, let's go to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. We got there's so many problems and red flags. We're at Constantine. We're about to read sections from Schaff and some material from J.N.D. Kelly on early Christian doctrines. We're going to talk about Council of Nicaea, so be prepared. But I want to make sure you understand where we are and how we got here. Let's take a look at Matthew 5. 5, 23. Go to 35. Matthew 5:36. Do not swear by your head. This is Jesus, Master talking. For you cannot make even one hair white or black. Do not swear. English Standard Version, do not take an oath. New American Standard, nor shall you take an oath. NASB 1995, 97, 1977, Legacy Standard, oath, amplified, oath. You get the point, right? Why is Constantine giving Eusebius an oath? Why doesn't he just tell him what happened? Knowing that the master plainly teaches, don't swear an oath. You can't do anything. What are you talking about? You can't turn one hair white or black. Why are you you're making an oath? Just say yes or no, right? Because look, in addition to don't swear an oath, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Okay, so everybody, does the master speak plainly to us? I think so, right? Sometimes he speaks in illustrations because people, they don't get the sense of it. Or sometimes we need help. Or sometimes things make more sense with an illustration. Otherwise, Master couldn't be more clear. He is the most clear. That's why it just says yes or no here. Okay, is this clear? Can we all agree on that? Prior verse, you don't say an oath. This verse, all you need to do is say yes or no. Constantine, are you going to tell me the truth? Yes, Eusebius. Okay, we good? Master, Matthew 5:30. Eusebius, no, you have to say an oath. If you don't say an oath, Constantine, I can't believe you because I'm a Christian and I need to tell other Christians you swore an oath. Does that sound right to you? No. Don't say an oath. All you need to say is yes or no. Anything. Trinitarians. Does anything mean that? Okay, never mind. Anything other than yes or no, where you're not swearing an oath also, is from whom? From whom is it? Trinitarians and others. These are explicit teachings of the Bible. And we're looking circumstantially at a major transition on the earth from a multi-beast beast, the Romans who worship these many gods, glorified these different beasts in cultic and occultic ways, and also used beasts in part of its entertainment and punishment, and is likened to a beast that took people captive and killed them by the sword. Explicit from our readings. We're at this point of transition now where we've got the first Roman emperor becoming the first Christian emperor, Constantine. And Eusebius's records of what his life is about and involved tell us a lot, right? It may not be accurate or true in terms of what really happened, but he's telling Eusebius that seems to be true. And he's making oaths that the Bible says you're not supposed to make, right? He's making oaths you're not supposed to make that Jesus says if you say anything other than yes or no, and you do anything and you swear an oath, that's from the wicked one. Anything. Trinitarians. Okay, I know. Let's just take a look at it real quick. What's the Greek text here? More than, right? More than these. Person tuton, from the evil one comes. Anything more than yes and no. Sorry, Trinitarians. There's no oath. So we've got Constantine being described by Eusebius in ways that have nothing to do with what the master explicitly taught us and showed would be how we're considered the greatest. We've got Eusebius going on and on in ways about Constantine being the greatest that have nothing to do with what the master says is being the greatest. It's like the opposite, right? He's contrasting people who rule over others and are their friend with those who are to be the greatest in a different way, right? So he's like contrasting with a Constantine. Even though, again, there's some Christian charity. But again, that's everyone's friend. That's exactly what Jesus said. And then we have this oath. We have this oath Constantine's not supposed to be giving, that he is giving, and that we're told anything more than yes or no to validate what you are telling people is from the wicked one. Oh, okay. So are we supposed to make an exception for Constantine now? He's not from the wicked one. The master says he is when he does these things. Well, let's go a little further then. Let's go a little further then. Remember how Lactantius described Constantine? So we just talked about Eusebius and some things that don't make any sense biblically, Christianly, in terms of Christianity, explicit teachings of Jesus. Remember last week, in last week's show, 44.7, Lactantius, in talking about Constantine, pretty sure it was Lactantius. It might have been the panegyric, but it talked about how one of them said Constantine cannot be overcome because of his victories. I think it was in Lactantius's account. And how this was very unnerving, to his enemies when the people began shouting this. What does that remind you of? Constantine cannot be overcome. What does that remind you of? Does it remind you of this part of our reading, Revelation 13. Oh, sorry. Oh, I went a little farther. 13:4. Does Lactantius's account of the people chanting, Constantine cannot be defeated, remind you of this? And they worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? Remember, the dragon with two horns like a lamb has all the authority of the first beast and sets up an image that makes people worship the first beast just like this. It goes on to describe that in this same chapter. But these words are very similar, right? The way that people worship this beast, which is, again, the same beast as the dragon with two horns like the lamb. So when the dragon with two horns like a lamb brings forth this praise and worship, it goes toward this beast. Who can do battle with it? Who's like the beast? Constantine cannot be defeated. Who can battle against him? That's how they worship. It's the same thing. So why would the beast be given the exact same wrongful, worshipful address and praise in comparison to others that Constantine receives? Because it's the same reason that Constantine is also described, as we just discussed, in association with Eusebius in terms of who's really the greatest and how you're the greatest. It's the total opposite. Constantine's way of being the greatest is being the beast. Better than all the other beasts, right? They're literally listed by Eusebius as the beast he's outdone. So how could he not be one? He's literally receiving the very same worshipful praise that Revelation 13:4 says the beast would receive, and that same chapter goes on to tell us is how the beast with two horns like a lamb makes people worship the first beast. It's all pointing. And then you have the whole yes meaning yes and no oath. And Constantine saying an oath about a story that involves Jesus appearing to him in a vision after he received a vision, I should say. In a dream, Jesus appeared allegedly. After he received a vision to conquer in the sign of a cross, which he then proceeds to use as a symbol in war to do just that. When in Revelation, in our own reading, it says in Revelation 11-13, it says, we read last week and we read before. So we'll move forward because we all know it, what it says. It says the Christians conquering with the blood of the Lamb and because of their witnessing, their testimony, not because of the sign of a cross. There's just a lot here that doesn't line up with very explicit statements in the Bible about what Christians conquer in, about how we affirm things, not with oaths, nothing more than yes or no. It's from the wicked one. Are we supposed to just ignore all that? And his account differs in ways that, again, aren't biblical, but that still could be embellishments from what happened originally based on Lactantius and the panegyric that we reviewed. There's just nothing here that really recommends itself upon close examination. Now, we're going to look at some more, but I wanted to go over that review with you so that you can at least see what we've discussed to this point, because I believe that with the coming of Constantine, we had effectively, like with Nero, right? It's not an exact year thing, but the transition certainly is apparent from this other beast that didn't have horns like a lamb, didn't look like a lamb at all, to this one that now looks very much like a lamb, but is very much not in many, many ways. Now, let's move forward further into this whole Constantine issue, and then a little further, and then we're going to come back and look at the Council of Nicaea, the Trinity, all the stuff. We're not going to go super crazy, but we'll do just enough. All right, so we're going to read first from Volume 2 of Schaff, History of the Christian Church. I'll try to keep this brief, but this is good stuff, okay? Just think about what I'm saying. I don't usually like to read, as you know, but we're doing it here as a way to just keep us from having to look at the online thing, and I can stop and talk, and, you know, it's a good way at times. It depends on the material. I think this fits. So let's go ahead and get with it. 72, Volume 2, Schaff. Let me read a couple of sections to you, okay? This was the first proclamation, talking about in 313, proclamation of toleration, edict of toleration, the edicts of toleration. This one here says, this was the first proclamation of the great principle. Remember, this is very important. You need to understand this, the change that took place. We talked about it, you know, in good detail last time. We can't cover everything. We're trying to show this progressive attack by the dragon, the war he's waging and how he's doing it, and how we can trace these things historically that are described for us in the Bible. Things that didn't even exist at that time. Some of them did, but not all of them. And now they do, and in ways that in the early 4th century, that's clearly way, and not anything foreseeable that I think for several centuries after the Christians first came about, is something that would likely be spoken as happening. And yet here we are, a dragon with 2 horns like a lamb, early 4th century. I'm associating with Constantine. But remember, it's not all bad. Right? This is a change from the all bad. From the multi-beast beast, just crazy, constant, continuous attacks, but that are not working. They're fundamentally not working. They're representations of the dragon. He gets a kick out of it. He's a pervert. They're not working. And he's also interested in surviving. Right. He's going to do everything he can, it seems to me. So what does he do? Well, now we get something totally different. We get this unusual event involving Constantine that doesn't make any sense from a biblically Christian perspective, have multiple red flags if you just look at it, literally telling you to conquer in a different way that's literally the opposite way of how Christians are to conquer, by giving our blood and our testimony, from taking up weapons in war and using a sign, an image, an idol on which Jesus died, right? That's not what the Bible says we conquer in. And we don't walk by faith, by sight, we walk by faith. So it just doesn't ring true in any way. Plus the other things I mentioned earlier, right? But yet it's such a dramatic change from a non-Christian, Christian-hating beast to a new beast that actually looks like Christianity. The first proclamation, Edict of Toleration, 313, Every man had the right to choose his religion according to the dictates of his own conscience and honest conviction, without compulsion and interference from the government, which is what had happened for the prior several hundred years. Religion is worth nothing except as an act of freedom. In other words, if someone, this is Shafta, I agree, if someone forces you to do something, what does it really matter? You were forced to do it. You didn't actually, this is why Josso's, his ways are correct. He always will let you choose, and he will find out. If you didn't get a chance to choose, trust me, he'll find out. A forced religion is no religion at all. It's page 73, Schaff, volume 2, History of the Christian Church. Unfortunately, the successors of Constantine from the time of Theodosius the Great, where we'll end tonight, 383 to 395, enforced the Christian religion to the exclusion of every other. In other words, everybody, within 100 years, this Christian-like beast becomes exactly like the prior beast, with all the authority of it and acting exactly like it, but pretending to be a lamb. And not only so, but they enforced orthodoxy, talking about the Christian emperors from Constantine to Theodosius the Great, basically all in the 4th century. Not only so, but they enforced orthodoxy to the exclusion of every form of dissent, which was punished as a crime against the state. You see how different it had become now? And we're going to review a little earlier, but within 100 years, before the 5th century, with the multi-beast beasts and anti-Christian Roman emperors taking us into the 4th century, and with Constantine having this change to something that looks more Christian but has the exact same authority and makes people give honor and worship to the prior beast. Same authority, and makes them worship the same beast that came before it. How many things can this apply to? Right? This is so incredible. This is actually, I think, powerful evidence the Bible is guided by God, preserved sufficiently by God to help us see these things clearly. This is just not something that could accidentally have been foretold in ways that so uniquely occur, like with Jesus. And of course, it's all related to him. Now let's go to page 74, just the next page. What a contrast between Nero, the first imperial persecutor, talking about Constantine versus Nero, right? Remember, Nero basically represents historically where most people and me can see that there's a difference now with Rome acting like a beast against the Christians that it hadn't been before. In fact, right before, all throughout the book of Acts leading to Nero, it was totally different. The Romans were actually coming to the aid of the Christians, if anything. Nero, the first imperial persecutor, riding in a chariot among Christian martyrs as burning torches in his gardens, and Constantine seated in the Council of Nicaea among 318 bishops, and giving the highest sanction of civil authority to the decree of eternal deity of the once crucified Jesus of Nazareth. Such a revolution the world has never seen before or since, except the silent spiritual and moral reformation wrought by Christianity itself. He's comparing this time with Constantine now and the events involving the Council of Nicaea and all these changes, everything being totally different in terms of the Christians now being a state religion. Literally 100% opposite of what it had been for several hundred years prior. He's comparing it in terms of significance with the coming of Christianity itself in the 1st century. And that is somewhat accurate, right? That would be what you would expect. We've got a dragon looking like a lamb. We've got a huge event here. This is a major deal, and that is, in fact, what we see. right, now let's go a little further. We'll go to page 176. Yeah, we're going to stay in volume 2 for just a moment. A little bit more here to set us up for further events going deeper into the 4th century, and then we're going to take a close look at the Council of Nicaea, some events, teachings of Arians, showing that we're not Arians. Although, like I told Sam, I don't care if he refers to me or some people like me as Arian-like Christians from an Orthodox perspective, right? I realize it's not easy for him and others who don't agree with us, and vehemently so, to categorize us, right? What am I going to do? No, Sam, call me up 1 Corinthians 8:6 Christian, right? He's not going to do that. So, Arian-like in the sense of really Jesus being temporal. There's a lot of differences, at least it seems, between us and Arians, or Arius, and his teachings. We'll look at it, so just hang tight. 176, Schaff, Volume 2. Okay, listen closely to this. Excuse me. Councils or synods were an important means of maintaining and promoting ecclesiastical unity and deciding questions of faith and discipline. They had a precedent and sanction in the Apostolic Conference of Jerusalem, right? In the same way like the Watchtower uses it as a precedent for the settlement of the circumcision controversy. They were suggested, moreover, by the deliberative political assemblies of the provinces of the Roman Empire, which met every year in the chief towns. This is a little bit before Constantine, but it's leading right into it. But we have no distinct trace of councils before the middle of the 2nd century, between 50 and 170, when they first appear in the disputes concerning Montanism and Easter. There are several kinds of synods according to their size. And he lists them. Our period knows only the first 3. Diocesan synods consist of the bishops and his presbyters and deacons with the people assisting, and were probably held from the beginning, but were not mentioned before the 3rd century. Provincial synods appear first in Greece, where the spirit of association had continued strong since the days of the Achaean League, and then in Asia Minor, North Africa, Gaul, Spain. They were held provincial synods, so far as the stormy times of persecution allowed, once or twice a year, these times when they would come together for these purposes, in the metropolis or city under the presidency of the metropolitan, who thus gradually acquired a supervision over the other bishops of the province, the intermingling of provincial authorities and Christian authorities. Special emergencies called out extraordinary sessions, and they, it seems, preceded the regular meetings. They were found to be useful and hence became institutions. Page 177, Schaff, Volume 2. The synodical meetings were public, and the people of the community around sometimes made their influence felt. In the time of Cyprian, presbyters, confessors, and laymen took an active part, a custom which seems to have the sanction of apostolic practice. And then the footnote refers to the book of Acts. At the synod, which met around 256, so about mid-3rd century, in the controversy, this is where everyone is, though, in the local area. In the controversy on the heretical baptism, there were present 87 bishops, very many priests and deacons, and in the synods concerning the restoration of the lapsi, Cyprian convened besides the bishops, his clergy. Nor was this practice confined to North Africa. Again, we're in the mid-3rd century. We meet it in Syria, because he's leading up to the Council of Nicaea, okay? And how this council kind of came about this way. And how councils and synods developed in the Christian community since the 1st century. Nor was this practice confined to North Africa. We meet it in Syria at the synods convened on account of Paul of Samosata, 264 to 269, and in Spain at the Council of Elvira. Origen, who was merely a presbyter, was the leading spirit of 2 Arabian synods, and convinced their bishop, Berilius, of his Christological error. That's how they see. Of course, and Origen didn't get everything right, but he was a lot more accurate than all of these people. Even the Roman clergy, in their letter to Cyprian, speak of a common synodical consultation of the bishops with the priests, deacons, confessors, and laymen in good standing. But with the advance of the hierarchical spirit, this Republican feature gradually vanished. It's page 178. Schaff, History of the Church, Volume 2. After the Council of Nicaea, 325, bishops alone had seat and voice, and the priests appear hereafter merely as secretaries or advisors or representatives of their bishops. The bishops, moreover, did not act as representatives of their churches, but in their own right as successors of the apostles. This is where we start to get this direct succession type of thinking, I believe. They did not as yet, however, in this period claim infallibility for their decisions, unless we choose to find a slight approach to such a claim in the Council of Carthage in 252. At all events, their decrees at the time had only moral power and could lay no claim to universal validity. Even Cyprian asserts absolute independence for each bishop in his own diocese. Quote, to each shepherd, Cyprian says, a portion of the Lord's flock has been assigned, and his account must be rendered to his master. The more important acts, such as electing bishops, excommunication, decisions of controversies, were communicated to other provinces by epistolae synodicae. In this intercourse, the translation of individual members of churches, letters of recommendation from the bishop were commonly employed or required in terms of admission. This is, I think, very important. I'm not going to get onto it too much now. Well, later. I don't think we do this enough. And it is explicitly told to us that we should be looking for this kind of thing. We need to be more careful about people. Not so cautious and paranoid that we don't accept them or try to work with people, but maybe not as accepting if we don't have good reason. In any case, I wanted to mention that. Expulsion from one church was virtually an expulsion from all associated churches. It's not unique to Watchtower. This again coming about in the mid-3rd century. The effect of the synodical system tended to consolidation. Schaff, Volume 2, bottom 178. The effect of the synodical system tended to consolidation. The Christian churches from independent communities held together by a spiritual fellowship of faith became a powerful confederation, a compact moral commonwealth within the political organization of the Roman Empire. As the episcopate culminated in the primacy, so the synodical system rose into the ecumenical councils, which represented the whole church of the Roman Empire. But these could not be held until persecution ceased, and the emperor became the patron of Christianity. The first was the celebrated Council of Nicaea in the year 325. The state gave legal validity to the decrees of councils. This is all new. This is totally new, everybody. This is something else giving authority and power to Christian doctrine. And this thing that's doing it, prior to doing it, is the enemy of Christian doctrine and has been fighting against it this entire time, and now it looks like a lamb. That's exactly how the dragon is described. We're getting all kinds of differences and changes and things that don't make sense, things that are directly in conflict with what the Master says, and with how the Christians were prior to this. This is something new. This is all very new. The state gave legal validity to the decrees of councils and enforced them, if necessary, by all its means of coercion. Page 179. But the Roman government protected only the Catholic or Orthodox Church, except during the progress of the Arian and other controversies, before the final result was reached by the decision of an ecumenical synod convened by the emperor. And I'll read parts of the notes, the note to that comment, page 179. This policy was inaugurated by Constantine I in 326. He confined the privileges and immunities in 313, which he had granted to Christians in his later enactments. He ratified the Nicene Creed and exiled Arius in 325, although he afterwards wavered and was baptized in 337 by a semi-Arian bishop. Constantine's immediate successors wavered likewise, the ones we're going to read about, the emperors. But as a rule, the Byzantine emperors recognized the decisions of councils in dogma and discipline, and discouraged and ultimately prohibited the formation of dissenting sects. The state can, of course, not prevent dissent as an individual opinion. It can only prohibit and punish the open profession. This is Schaff, bottom of page 179, Footnote, full religious liberty requires separation of church and state. I think that's probably true, at least in this time, in our human existence, because of the imperfections and the ability of the dragon, right? Without a separation, he can do exactly what he's doing right now. He can use it as a weapon. He can take the thing that has been a weapon and use it as a weapon in a way that doesn't seem like it's a weapon. He's a dragon with two horns like a lamb. So how is he doing that? Well, we're going to find out. I'm going to read more to you from Schaff. So listen to this. This is Schaff, History of the Christian Church, Volume 3. And I'm going to read just a small section on page 12. Picking up kind of from where we just left off in Volume 2, at least in terms of our subject. Page 12. Constantine, the first Christian Caesar, the founder of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, and one of the most gifted, energetic, and successful of the Roman emperors, was the first representative of the imposing idea of a Christian theocracy, or of that system of policy which assumes all subjects to be Christians, connects civil and religious rights, and regards church and state as the two arms of one and the same divine government on earth. This idea was more fully developed by his successors. It animated the whole Middle Age, and is yet working under various forms in these latest times, though it has never been fully realized, whether in the Byzantine, the German, the Russian Empire, the Roman Church state, the Calvinistic Republic of Geneva, or the early Puritanic colonies of New England. At the same time, however, Constantine stands as the type of an undiscriminated and harmful conjunction of Christianity with politics. Let me read that again. At the same time, Constantine stands also as the type of an undiscriminating and harmful conjunction of Christianity with politics, of the holy symbol of peace, two horns like a lamb, with the horrors of war, dragon, of the spiritual interests of the kingdom of heaven with the earthly interests of the state. My kingdom is no part of this world. The dragon's been thrown down to you. The kingdom was born in heaven, not on earth. None of this fits. None of the ways that Constantine was conceived of, or the administration of his government, the toleration of the Christians is great, right? But that's not exactly, in one sense, yes, things were a lot better. But the dragon, if this is a dragon acting like a lamb, that's what you would expect. He's got to act like a lamb. You can't have two horns like a lamb if you're not doing something like a lamb. So, what is he doing? Well, let's take a closer look. Again, Schaff, Volume 3, some of the events. Constantine. We're going to work our way through the end of the 4th century, and then we're going to look closely at the Council of Nicaea for a moment. So, Schaff, Volume 3, page 37. Okay, listen to this. With the death of Constantine, the monarchy also came for the present to an end. So this is in 337. The empire was divided among his three sons, Constantine II, Constans, and Constantius. This accession was not in Christian style, but after the manner of genuine Turkish Oriental despotism. It trod upon the corpses of the numerous kindred of their father, excepting two nephews, Gallus and Julian, who were saved only by sickness and youth from the fury of the soldiers. 3 years later followed a war of the brothers for the sole supremacy, Constantine's sons. Constantine II was slain by Constans in 340, who was in turn murdered by a barbarian field officer and rival, Magnentius, in 350. After the defeat and suicide of Magnentius, Constantius, who had hitherto reigned in the east, became sole emperor and maintained himself through many storms until his natural death in 361. The sons of Constantine did their Christian education little honor and departed from their father's wise policy of toleration. Constantius, a temperate and chaste, but jealous, vain, and weak prince, entirely under the control of eunuchs, women, and bishops, entered upon a violent suppression of the heathen religion, pillaged and destroyed many temples, gave the booty to the church, or to his eunuchs, flatterers, and worthless favorites, and prohibited, under the penalty of death, all sacrifices and worship of images in Rome, Alexandria, and Athens, though the prohibitions could not be carried out. Hosts now came over to Christianity, though, of course, for the most part, with lips only, not with the heart. You see, look at what the dragon is doing. He's using this beast like a lamb, to do the same thing. He's now attacking the very people Christians are supposed to be trying to convert. Not with the sword, right? What is the Bible in our reading, Revelation 11 through 13, say the wild beast would do? Which is the same beast that the dragon with horns like a lamb gives authority to. Makes everyone worship that first beast. What does it say he would do? Take people captive and kill them by the sword. See, that sounds more like the beast. And everything else we read makes Constantine and what happened with and after him and the Roman Empire that's now a Christian Roman Empire, this beast. Everything it's doing, everything it's saying, the things it teaches, the primary figures that are responsible for these things, none of it's founded on explicit Christian teachings. It's all the opposite of it. So far, anyway. Let's take another look. Where did we read that to? All right. But this emperor proceeded with the same. This is talking about Constantius, right? The guy who made a whole bunch of people come over to Christianity because he kept destroying all the heathen temples and images and set up laws forbidding their worship. Made a lot of people come over, but not the kind of people. What did Jesus say, quoting Isaiah, say about the people? They honor me with their lips, but their heart is far removed from me. Does this sound like the kind of people that represents the seed of the woman? No. He even describes him himself, Shaf, as people who were only Christian in lip, not heart. So see, the dragon's doing something totally different, and now it's working. He's actually able to get people to claim to be Christian, but they're not. Like him. He is getting them to be like him. The dragon with two horns like a lamb. And it's not that Schaff is making an identification. He's just describing it in ways that are so applicable historically to what John saw. Constantius also showed intolerance against the adherents of the Nicene Orthodoxy, so now things have changed. Everyone always talks about how like Constantine established Trinitarianism, or at least a non-Arian way. No, he did not. He did it for a time. And then he was exiled. Arius was even brought back. And while all of this is dragon stuff, right, you're going to see from Arius' teachings, right, even though he's a little bit closer to us metaphysically, he's still not representing the biblical teaching. Why I'm not an Arian, right? I just do it for Sam. Try to give him an hour. So make it easier. Right? I don't want to have him forced to acknowledge me as a Christian, I guess, right? What's he supposed to say? Either way. He goes on to talk about how Constantius meddled with all the affairs of the church. It says his brother supported Athanasius, but he himself, Constantius, was a fanatical Arian. Right? So this was after Constantine died, his sons. There was no agreement here. Everyone knew these guys were nuts. Or at least there was certainly not this enduring agreement among everybody now that Nicaea had happened. In fact, Constantius meddled in all the affairs of the church, which was convulsed during his reign with doctrinal controversy. That sounds like a dragon's work. He summoned a multitude of councils in Gaul and Italy and Illyricum and in Asia, aspired to the renown of a theologian. He was fond of being called Bishop of Bishops, though, like his father, he postponed baptism till shortly before his death. That doesn't sound like a very sincere Christian to me, either one of them. There were those, it is true, who justified this violent suppression of idolatry by reference to the extermination of the Canaanites under Joshua. Let's see. But intelligent church teachers, Shaw, Volume 3, page 39, like Athanasius, Hosius, and Hilary, gave their voice for toleration, though even they mean particularly toleration for orthodoxy, for the sake of which they themselves had been deposed and banished by the Arian power. So you had this back and forth, just like he said, doctrinal convulsions, right? This ongoing upheaval now, where while the Christians weren't being necessarily attacked physically, like they were with the multi-beast beast, they're being divided, fractured, and caused to become Christians by lip only, not in heart. That's what the dragon wants. He tries to get it by the physical acts and torture, but if he can't, he changes tactics. Oh, yes, he does. And he did a good job in that sense. It's terrible stuff, right? We're not applauding him, but if we don't acknowledge the strategy, we won't be able to counter it. By the laws of history, the forced Christianity of Constantius must provoke a reaction of heathenism. And such reaction, in fact, ensued, though only for a brief period immediately after this emperor's death. So, again, Constantius the attempts to, even though they were doctrinally convulsing, right, still back and forth with the whole Arian controversy. This pro-Christian emperor Constantine, the great son, his attempts, he went overboard, right? He essentially used the tactics of the dragon against the heathen, right? He made the Christians the same as the heathen who attacked the Christians. And what did that do? It created a whole bunch of fake Christians, and it inspired the heathen to attack. Now we move to Julian the Apostate after Constantius, right? He's attacking all the heathen, the temples, the idols. He's also insane, of course, and doctrinally convulsing. He's part of the dragon, right? He's all these different emperors and their ways, and he's trying to stop the seed of the woman, and now he's got this new tactic. So we get to Julian the Apostate, period of 361 to 363. Page 41, volume 3, Shah Julian, surnamed the Apostate, a nephew of Constantine the Great and cousin of Constantius, was born in the year 331 and was therefore only 6 years old when his uncle died. Talking about Constantine the Great. The general slaughter of his kindred, not accepting his father at the change of the throne, could beget neither love for Constantius nor respect for his court Christianity. He, that is Julian, afterwards ascribed his escape to the special favor of the old gods. He was systematically spoiled by false education and made the enemy of that very religion which pedantic teachers attempted to force upon his free and independent mind, and which they so poorly recommended by their lives, talking about Christianity. Right, so we'll go from Constantine, this vision, sign, conquering, all this stuff, none of it's biblical or anti-biblical. Then we go to Constantius. He goes nuts, doctrinal controversies. He goes way overboard like a dragon attacking the heathen, which only ends up doing the very thing that you would expect, inciting the heathen against the Christians, a tactic of the dragon, in addition to him getting many of them to become false Christians by threatening them, by attacking them like a dragon. Hey, tactics have changed, everyone. There's a new beast in town. All the authority of the first beast, though. Sword, captive, image, all of it. Old gods right here. See, even now with the horns like a lamb, he's still the dragon. He's got Julian now. After Constantius just went insane, and Constantine did all this weird, wild stuff that's not biblical against the Bible. Queen Nicaea that we'll get back to. Julian was jealously watched by the emperor and kept in royal retirement almost like a prisoner. With his stepbrother Gallus, he received a nominally Christian training under the direction of the Arian bishop Eusebius of Nicomedia and several eunuchs. He was baptized, even educated for the clerical order, and ordained elector. He prayed, fasted, celebrated the memory of the martyrs, paid the usual reverence to the bishops, this is page 42, Shah, volume 3, besought the blessing of the hermits, read the scriptures in the church of Nicomedia. Even his plays must wear the hue of devotion. It's talking about Julian the Apostate, the emperor after Constantius. But this despotic and mechanical forcework of a repulsively austere and fiercely polemic of Christianity, Shah, roused the intelligent, wakeful, and vigorous spirit of Julian to rebellion and drove him over towards the heathen side. The Arian pseudo-Christianity of Constantius produced the heathen anti-Christianity of Julian. They're all causing each other to go nuts. Totally on Christ-like. And the latter was a well-deserved punishment of the former. With enthusiasm and with untiring diligence, the young prince studied Homer, talking about Julian, Plato, Aristotle, and the Neoplatonists. The partial prohibition of such reading gave it double zest. Julian secretly obtained the lectures of the celebrated rhetorician Libanius, afterwards his eulogist, whose productions, however, represent the degeneracy of the heathen literature in the day, covering emptiness with a pompous and tawdry style, attractive only to a vitiated taste. Almost done. He became acquainted by degrees with the most eminent representatives, talking about Julian, of heathenism, all the stuff he's pursuing as the third, the Constantine, the first Christian emperor, Constantius the second, him supposedly the third. He's doing all this stuff, right? None of these emperors are displaying traits of the Christ in any way that I can see. I'm not saying they never did anything nice, of course. Again, there's got to be horns like a lamb. You don't get horns like a lamb unless you do something like a lamb to deceive people from seeing that you're actually a dragon. That's the whole point of disguising yourself. So we're almost done here. These confined Julian and his superstitions by sophistics and sorceries of every kind. Julian gradually became the secret head of the heathen party. Through the favor and mediation of the Empress Eusebia, he visited for some months in the schools of Athens in 355, where he was initiated in the Eleusinian mysteries, and thus completed his transition to the Grecian idolatry. Okay, so this is Constantine's nephew, the third emperor since him, in the Christian Roman dragon-like lamb conversion, still making people worship the first beast, even if they're pro-Christian, right? By attacking the heathen, acting like a dragon, inciting them, right? Not doing the things that a lamb would actually do, like we read, and just comparing the basic beliefs of Constantine and things he did and said and is thought to have seen. None of them fit what we're told. All right, so let's go a little bit more here to finish up this succession of emperors to Theodosius the Great at the end of the 4th century. So you can see dragon with two horns like a lamb is in full effect, everybody. We're going to go back and look at the Council of Nicaea more closely at the end. But let's get to the discussions about this whole appearance of this dragon. Okay, he's clearly here now, in my opinion, and using Christianity to fight the seed of the woman. Just like he used ancient Judaism and why they had so many problems. This is what he does. He knows how to get what he wants. It doesn't mean he's always going to get it, but he knows what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't, he'll do something else. Page 60. After Julian, the succession of Christian emperors continued unbroken. On the day of his death, which was also the extinction of the Constantinian family, the general Jovian, a Christian, 363 to 364, was chosen emperor by the army. This is after Julian. He concluded with the Persians a disadvantageous but necessary peace, replaced the cross in the Liberium, the banner Constantine saw, and restored to the church her privileges. Let's talk about Jovian. But beyond this, declared universal toleration in the spirit of Constantine. Unlike the circumstances, this was plainly the wisest policy. Like Constantine, he also abstained from all interference with the internal affairs of the church, though for himself holding the Nicene faith and warmly favorable to Athanasius. Jovian died in the 33rd year of his age after a brief reign of 8 months. His successor, Valentinian I, died in 375. Though generally inclined to despotic measures, well, let's see. We want to read that part about, Valentine I, 375, was Jovian's successor. It was generally inclined to despotic measures, page 60. Though personally an adherent of the Nicene orthodoxy, Valentinian I kept aloof from the doctrinal controversies, while his brother and co-emperor Valens, who reigned in the East till 378, page 61, shop line 3, favored the Arians. and persecuted the Catholics, right? This is till 378. So we have this ongoing dispute at the emperor level. Well after, right? 50 years, more than 50 years after Nicaea. So the idea that somehow Nicaea resolved all this, and of course it didn't, even in terms of what it did resolve upon, but there was no unity here. No, this is not in any way reflecting a Christian religion. This is reflecting a dragon with two horns like a lamb. What was just a beast attacking the Christians, adopting Christianity and perverting it. Literally going against explicit statements, right? Not even just the emperors, but even the chroniclers, Eusebius, talking about people in ways that make no sense, taking oaths more than yes or no, which is from the wicked one. Let's get back and finish the reading. The same toleration continued. Wait a minute. We're talking about Valens, who reigned, okay, till 378. Valens favored the Arians, persecuted the Catholics. Both, however, Valens and Valentine I, prohibited bloody sacrifices and divination. Maximin, the representative of Valentinian at Rome, proceeded with savage cruelty against all who were found guilty of the crime of magic, especially the Roman aristocracy. Soothsayers were burnt alive. So we literally have the same methods that Nero used, being used by people enforcing Christianity. Does that sound normal to you? No, it sounds like the same being in two different guises, doing the exact same things. While their meaner accomplices were beaten to death by straps loaded with lead, in almost every case recorded, the magical arts can be traced to pagan religious usages. So they were none of them considered Christian in any way. So they were that clear object of attack, just like the way the Christians were before this. The same tactics, same actual tortures, in fact. Of course, we know the dragon continued to use that for a long time. Just to finish up here, though, we go to bottom of page 61. The same toleration continued under Gratian, son and successor of Valentinian, from 375 to 383. After a time, however, under the influence of Ambrose, bishop of Milan, this emperor went a step further. He laid aside the title and dignity of Pontifex Maximus. My apologies. Confiscated the temple property, abolished most of the privileges of the priests and vestal virgins, and withdrew, at least in part, the appropriation from the public treasury for their support. By this step, heathenism became, like Christianity before Constantine and now an American republic, dependent on the voluntary system, while unlike Christianity, it had no spirit of self-sacrifice, no energy of self-preservation. And let's see. I want to make sure we go to the right spot here. Under his brother Valentine II, 383 to 292, he also rejected the renewed petition of the Romans for the restoration of the altar of Victoria in 384. But Ambrose of Milan represented to the emperor in firm tone of episcopal dignity that the grain of the petition would be sanction of heathenism and a renunciation of his Christian convictions. Denied that the greatness of Rome was due to idolatry, to which, indeed, her subjugated enemies were likewise addicted, and contrasted the power of Christianity, which had greatly increased under persecution and had produced whole hosts of consecrated virgins and ascetics, and with the weakness of heathenism. This is Milan contrasting the two to Valentinian II. Apologize for the way it reads, it's a little bit older publication. The same petition was renewed in 389 to Theodosius, right? So this is the petition for the Romans and the restoration of the altar of Victoria. So we're getting heathens trying to get certain Roman customs and religious practices reinstated. We have Christians telling the emperors, no, you can't do that. If you do that, that's going to go against your Christian conviction. That's what Ambrose is telling Valentine II. But then the heathen come back and give the same petition to Theodosius in 389. This is Schaff, page 63. But again, Ambrose comes in and influences Theodosius not to accept it. And then it says the triumph which the heathen partly gained under the usurper Eugenius, 392 to 394, lasted but only a couple years, right before Theodosius. And after his defeat by Theodosius, 600 of the most distinguished patrician families, the Ani, Probi, Anisi, he goes on to list several others, are said by Prudentius to have gone over at once to the Christian religion. Right. So again, we're getting a lot of this stuff here happening under conditions that don't match the way they're supposed to happen. The way people are converting and through these different conquests by these Christian emperors. Last part of our reading, 392, Theodosius the Great. The final suppression of heathenism is usually, though not quite justly, ascribed to the Emperor Theodosius I, who on this account, as well as for his victories over the Goths, his wise legislation and other services to the empire, bear the distinction of the Great, like Constantine the Great, Theodosius the Great, and deserves for his personal virtues to be counted among the best emperors of Rome, Theodosius. A native of Spain, son of a very worthy general of the same name, Theodosius was called by Gratian to be co-emperor in the East in a time of great danger from the threatening barbarians in 379. After the death of Valentinian, Theodosius rose to the head of the empire in 392 to 395. This is where we're going to end. Theodosius labored for the unity of the state and the supremacy of the Catholic religion. He was a decided adherent of the Nicene Orthodoxy, procured it the victory at the Second Ecumenical Council in 381, Constantinople, gave it all the privileges of the state religion, and issued a series of rigid laws against all heretics and schismatics in his treatment of heathenism. For a time, he only enforced the existing prohibition of sacrifice for purpose of magic and divination in 385, but gradually extended it to the whole sacrificial worship. This is page 64, Schaff, volume 3. Last part. In the year 381, Theodosius prohibited, under heavy fine, the visiting of a heathen temple for a religious purpose. The following year, even the private performance of libations and other pagan rites, he prohibited. The practice of idolatry was therefore henceforth a political offense, as Constantius had already, though prematurely, declared it to be, and was subjugated to the severest penalties. This is a total reversal, right? I mean, everybody, it's so clear to me, at least, and again, none of this is required, but, you know, if we want to be guided by accuracy and history and the best available reasons, we're looking at these texts, and I'm seeing a pretty clear picture, clear enough for me to believe. I don't have to have everything perfect, but this is about as good as I can imagine, right? It's like, once you really see and you understand these teachings and you've been involved with it the way we have, and we look at it closely and we don't bring any prejudices from other systems, we just say, what's happening here? Right? What's going on here? Well, it becomes a lot easier to make sense of these things and to see what's been happening since the first century. It's been exactly like it was foretold. And the evidence shows that Revelation was written in the middle of first century, probably. Before the temple, I would say, was destroyed. And even if it was late first century, right? To be writing about this attack against the woman, this water attack, and then the earth helping her, and like we see in Acts, and then this beast, exactly like the point after Acts and forward, to another beast that looks Christian, but is acting like a dragon, and it's not just that, right? In our reading, we're not going to get into it again because we've read it again and again. But as we've seen, this second beast, this dragon with two horns like a lamb, It's pointing everyone to the first beast. We saw that last week in 44.7 with Constantine. Talked about it a little tonight, but we talked about more with the other emperors, right? His sons and his nephews and others after them. There's this ongoing either pagan type Christianity where there's oaths and going beyond yes and no and taking praise for being the greatest through conquest and being adored with worshipful words like the beast, right? None of this fits the master. It's all dragon-like beast stuff, and now it's kind of couched in this lamb-like disguise. And so we see this war ongoing. We see these theological convulsions, as Schaff put it, ongoing. Not just up to and at the Council of Nicaea, ongoing. First, you get Arius excommunicated. Then Athanasius is exiled, right? And Constantine doesn't convert until his deathbed, and he's taking oaths. And he's talking about things that don't fit what the Bible says. Totally different from how Christians conquer. And he's being praised in ways that reflect exactly, pretty much, the beast. He's just got a little lamb also. All right. So I think, there's so much more we could be. I can't read all of it, right? Where are we? We're over 2 hours, and I just read selections very briefly, right? That help you picture in your mind what kind of associations we're making and why. And how this fits time-wise and event-wise with history after the Bible was completed. And how really uniquely it does so. And in ways that are actually very clever, right? And like for us, like it says in Revelation 1:1, for us to see what's happening, right? When we really look at it and we're really genuine, we can kind of, I can see what's happening here. And that makes sense. Look at all this stuff here. It's the same thing right there. So now we go from this point where you have a lot more physical torture and attack by the multi-beast to the seed of the woman, right? To this dragon with horns like a lamb attacking non-Christians the way it attacked the Christians, right? It's burning people alive, same stuff. That alone, to me, says this isn't of God here. No, this is the same thing. It's the same one. The dragon was pretending to be that multi-beast beast. Now he's pretending to be a lamb. And that's why you can see he's doing the same things for the same reason. Right? If he can get so-called Christians, the seed of the woman, to burn people alive, does that sound like conquering to you? Well, it does to these Christians, because conquering to them is Constantine. In this sign, conquer. What does that mean? Go and destroy your enemies. In this sign, use Christianity and destroy them. The way I was just using Rome, the wild beast, to destroy you, but it kept, sealing seed of the woman. I want you to now become that. Right, because then you won't be able to conquer. You'll be thinking you're going to conquer because of the dream I'm going to show Constantine, all this stuff, where it's totally different from everything else you've been told. Right, if I can get you to start burning people alive and killing them over false doctrine, right, because why else would they do it? You'd have to confuse them, right? If people are believing in true doctrine, right, if they're thinking they're not supposed to take oaths and they're not supposed to be calling people the greatest except for them being the servant of all, well, it's not going to work. So false doctrine almost has to be introduced in some measure, because to get people to do the kind of things the dragon needs to do and use the Christians to do it, he's got to get them thinking like him. Oh yeah, that's why there's always this fighting, this conflict, right? It never ends, and it never hasn't since it began in these ways. Let's take a closer look at it. I'm going to be reading a couple of sections to you from J&D Kelly's standard source, Early Christian Doctrines. Let me just take a look at the chat here. We're going to wrap it up with this here, but I'm going to read some sections on the teachings of Arius. and some stuff about the Council of Nicaea and what came out of it. And we'll talk about it for as long as you want. So we're going to get into it real heavy here for, however long you want, half hour. I'll go a while here. This is the good part, right, for a lot of you. Although, again, I think this is really important in terms of Revelation 11 through 13. I think now we can see a way we can understand this sensibly from a biblical perspective historically, so that we are not confused and we understand how things are going and what's happening and where we are. We'll look at other portions of Revelation another time. But I think this helps us appreciate well where things have gone from just before the time Jesus was killed, so during the time of John, at least, I would say, or at least from time of Jesus' baptism, potentially, or, I think it's where I associate it, although some people might try to associate with his human birth, but we couldn't. If you watch the prior episodes, that didn't make sense, really, based on the evidence. So I take it more from the Revelation 11 through 13, from the time of Jesus' baptism with John, one of the two witnesses, through to, at least this period in the 4th century where everything radically changed, like Schaff said, similar to how it changed in the 1st century. It's so dramatic, right? I mean, incredible. When you watch the last episodes and listen to what I read to you, and you see how much Rome attacked the Christians, and even though it was a back and forth type thing, because efforts of the dragon don't always pay off the way he wants, he kept going, right? And now he's using this. And you can see how he's using it in the same way, but different. Instead of just persecuting the Christians, he's using the Christians to persecute non-Christians, which is not what we're supposed to do. Doesn't mean we agree with them, but he's using them to kill them, burn them alive. The various Christian Roman emperors and the way they conquered, and even Constantine, right? In this sign, boom, go conquer. No blood of the lamb by giving your life like has been happening several hundred years prior. And testimony, no, you use this sign, boom, cross, go, stab, sword, captivity, right? No, that's the wild beast. J.N.D. Kelly, early Christian doctrines. Let's take a look at Nicaea. So I think one of the best ways to do that. Now remember, this is not meant to be an extended review of theology and the Council of Nicaea. We're talking about Revelation 11 through 13, which covers this period. And it's a big part of it. But to get into the really deep theology, we have done that and are doing it separately. Once we get to this point in our early Christian views of Jesus, will pretty much end around this time, maybe later in the 4th, so maybe Chalcedon, 5th century. We'll go from the early Christian writers to the point where it's no longer early and it's gone, right? So we'll do that there and elsewhere, Bible and Trinian Conflict series. But here, I want to do a little bit of it so you can see the problems surrounding the Trinity and the Council of Nicaea and why this is so different, right? We already read a lot of how it's different with the whole progression of synods, provincial synods to ecumenical councils that are enforced by the state, right? If you don't accept it, you're a heretic. It's state enforced now. That alone shows you we've got the dragon involved, and it's different. Kingdom is no part of this world. This was viewed as basically the kingdom of God on earth. So it's totally different. Everything about it is different. All right, let's do some reading here. Page 226. Under the teaching of Arius. Okay, so if you really want to know, are we Arians? Well, first of all, as I've said before, the answer is no. We just have some similarities. We have similarities with Trinitarians too. This doesn't make us Trinitarian. A little bit more on the Arian side because of the metaphysical differences, like temporality, non-temporality, creation, non-creation. So there's definitely more of a similarity there. That's why I don't care if Sam or others say I'm an Arian-like. You just call me an Arian, that's inaccurate. That's not correct. And I'm going to show you that clearly right now. No, most of it, if not all of what we have from Arius is basically preserved by his enemies. And we all know how that can go. That doesn't mean everything is wrong. but I don't 100% accept it as reflective of Arius' true teaching. But for the sake of argument, I don't see any real problem doing that because I don't get my teaching from him. I never even had read him when I came up with one God the Father. I got it from Paul, okay? That's who I got it from. And the other text, the same thing in the Bible. But yes, I recognize Arius was a different figure from the Trinitarianism being taught in the 4th century and was closer to one God the Father and Jesus as a real temporal being than comes about later, right? Or that we see right now. So what though else in Arius' teaching would make him different from me and others like me? Let me read Kelly here, a couple pages. 226, Teaching of Arius. Such was the theological climate in which Arius' controversial conclusions about the Word were being hotly debated in the decade before 324. Arius had a handful of resolute coadjutors, Eusebius of Nicomedia being the political tactician of the group. Our chief sources of information about his ideas are certain letters by himself, his allies, and his critics, and such fragments of his Thalia or Banquet, a popular medley of prose and verse, as Athanasius has preserved in his polemical writings, the writing against Arius. The fundamental premise of Arius' system is the affirmation of the absolute uniqueness and transcendence of God, the unoriginate source, agenitas arche, right? Unbegotten arche, right? Using arche in a sense different from the Bible, right? Some Trinitarians like to do that in Revelation 3:14, use it as source because of later usage. Arche, right, usually means beginning. Can mean ruler or some things, but with the genitive expression, it's consistently in the New Testament, beginning. This is talking about Arius speaking about God as the unoriginate source of all reality. So the authoritative, though diplomatically worded profession of faith, which, along with Arius' close partners, he sent to Bishop Alexander, opens with the uncompromising statement. This is Arius' opening statement in his letter to the Bishop Alexander. We acknowledge one God, who is alone ingenerate, ageneton, alone eternal, alone without beginning, anarchon, alone true, alone possessing immortality, alone wise, alone good, alone sovereign, alone judge of all. See, so that right there has several parts of it that we don't agree with, right? We believe Jesus is the judge of all now. Now, maybe he would qualify this more in terms of him being given that authority, but if he's talking about eternally, no, we disagree with that. Alone possessing immortality, we don't agree with that. We believe Jesus has been raised immortal and no longer dies. That he will continue, whereas the things that he was instrumental in bringing into existence will not. Hebrews 1, quoting Psalm 102. Making a messianic application, as we've talked about. Right? But moving on, since it is unique, transcendent, and indivisible, the being or essence, ousia, of the Godhead cannot be shared or communicated. This is Kelly talking about Arius' view. For God to impart his substance to some other being, however exalted, would imply that he is divisible and subject to change, which is inconceivable. Moreover, if any other being were to participate in the divine nature in any valid sense, there would result a duality of divine beings, whereas the Godhead is by definition unique. Therefore, whatever else exists must have come into existence, not by any communication of God's being, but by an act of creation on his part, i.e., must have been called into existence out of nothing. We don't believe that. If you're like me, you don't believe that. We don't believe in creation ex nihilo. The Bible doesn't teach that anywhere. Some people try to interpret things in the Bible to mean that, but it nowhere says that. What it does say explicitly that you don't have to interpret, you just have to read, is that all things have come out of the Father. That's it. Game over. Some people try to say, well, Jesus brought up a coin in the mouth of a fish. Well, that doesn't say he created it ex nihilo, does it? And why would he need a fish? Why couldn't he just create the coin and hand it to him then? It's the most obvious reading and interpretation, but the best one, based on the evidence, is that the fish ate the coin, and he brought the fish up and gave him the coin. So we're going to believe that God created out of nothing a coin in a fish's mouth and minted it with the image of the emperor? Why would he have to? Why? There's no real sense to that. You can believe it if you want. It doesn't say that. That's the most important thing. And the most logical interpretation is coins fall in the water. They're all over the place. And it would be a divine manifestation to bring the coin up, but that's all the text actually says happened. The fish had the coin in its mouth, and Jesus brought the fish up. Or the fish was brought up with the coin. That's all it says. It doesn't give any support to anything being created out of nothing in any way. It's just an interpretation that suggests the only way a fish could have a coin in its mouth is if God created out of nothing, which isn't true. So this is not true. We are not Arian. We don't believe in creation ex nihilo. The Bible doesn't teach that, so why would we? We believe what the Bible explicitly teaches. Everything's out of the Father. Kelly 227, teaching of Arius. By God, Arius meant, of course, God the Father. What then of the Son or Word? An inaccurate title, according to Arius. If that's true, again, we don't agree with that. We think it's an accurate title because it is his title. It's a name he's given in the book of Revelation. And then used by the very author of that book in John. Because it's John. Arius agreed that the Father, because what then of the Word, whom Arius agreed that the Father, because the contingent world could not bear his direct impact, used as his organ of creation and cosmic activity. The attitude of Arius and his colleagues can be summarized in 4 propositions which follow logically from the preceding premise. First, the Son must be a creature, a katisma, or a poema, a creation or something made, whom the Father has formed out of nothing by his mere fiat. Again, we don't agree here. This is a radical departure from Christian witnesses of Jah, Christians who believe 1 Corinthians 8:6, and Arius. This is why we can't be called Arians. You want to call us Arian-like for convenience, because it's the most notable figure that has this controversial similarity with us, that's fine. But I would be really careful, right? It's totally different. If you do that and you make people think we believe in creation ex nihilo, and you try to use that as part of your argument against us, well, you're just going to be defeated, which is fine, I guess, but I don't know why you would do that. Whom the Father has formed out of nothing by his mere fiat. Okay, the term beget, genan, applied to the Son's generation must therefore bear the purely figurative sense of make. To suggest the Son is an emanation from or a consubstantial portion of the Father is to reduce the Godhead to physical categories. He's talking about Arius' view. True, he is a perfect creature, Kelly referring to Arius' view, and not to be compared with the rest of creation, which is what he even goes on to do, but that he is a creature owing his ability wholly to the Father's will follows from the primary fact that he is not self-existent. And that is true. And that part is true. Not the ex nihilo part, but he explicitly states, I live because of the Father. And even if you want to take that in a spiritual sense, as God, that's not something that would be possible. You wouldn't live spiritually or literally because of anyone, right? And again, you're not limited on earth as God. You're God. That's why Trinitarians regularly try to say he's God on earth, because of things that they say only God could do, right? They want to have the cake and eat it too. We're not going to allow that. So this self-existence, though, right? Everything in the Bible points to the temporality of Jesus and the life given to him by the Father, right? Not just John 6:57 in that sense, but more explicitly in John 5:26, Father granted him to have life in himself. Well, if that's not talking about his creation, then there was a type of life he didn't have in himself. That's called self-existence. And if you want to, like Trinitarians often do, lie and say it's just the resurrection life, no, there's just life. You either have life in you and you can give it to others, or you don't. There's not like a different type of life. You're just alive or you're not alive. Whether you're resurrected or you're the firstborn from the dead or you're created, it's still coming into life. And if it's just resurrected life, you want to say, how could he not already have that as God? What are you talking about? How could God have a different quality of life in him than Jesus to have to give it to him? John 5:26 explicitly states the Father gave Jesus life in himself. So he didn't have that life in himself before he was given it. And that's not human life. He already had that and was given that as human birth. It's not what he's talking about there, obviously, contextually. So whatever it is, it's a type of life that's an essential attribute to his nature that he doesn't have eternally with the Father. Game over. But they're not thinking like Arius. See, Arius is off. He doesn't understand the actual biblical association between the Father and the Son in all things. He thinks he's got to come up with this ex nihilo way of explaining things. No, Arius, that was also a false doctrine. That's why you and Athanasius and all your bishops and arguers at the Council of Nicaea and thereafter were just willing fools in the hands of the dragon with two horns like a lamb. None of you should have been in these positions playing his song and dance while he's converting into the enemy, which is you, in order to deceive you all and get you to argue nonstop, which you all have been doing. Well, we've all fallen for this trap of the dragon. We've talked about it. All right, let's keep going. We should observe that the Arians exploited the systematic ambiguity of the term agenitos, deducing from the self-evident truth that the Son is not ungenerate, the more questionable conclusion that he must belong to the contingent order. Secondly, as a creature, the Son must have had a beginning. We are persecuted, Arius protests, because we say the Son had a beginning, whereas God is without beginning. He came into existence, Arius writes in the same letter, before the times and ages. Inevitably so, because he is the creator of time itself, no less than of everything else belonging to the world of contingency. This is summarizing Arius' view in comments. Nevertheless, although born outside time, which we don't believe, this is again another false, non-Christian, non-biblical idea of time. Akronos genestes, born outside of time. Again, this is not a biblical teaching or expression. Prior to his generation, he did not exist. This is Arius' teaching. Hence the familiar, monotonously repeated Arian slogan, there was when he was not. Similar to Tertullian's phrase, et filius non fuit. The orthodox suggestion that he was in the strict sense eternal, i.e. co-eternal with the Father, seemed to Arius to entail presupposing two self-existent principles, which spelt the destruction of monotheism. You see, even he couldn't put it together biblically because they were all influenced by these Neoplatonic ideas and other philosophies related to time and creation and existence that aren't biblical. They're not what the Bible talks about. It's what they start talking about and then interpret the Bible in light of what they talk about, right? Instead of just believing the Bible. It's real simple. 1 Corinthians 8, 4 through 6. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Well, we'll look at it in a moment. But we've all seen it, right? There is no God but one. And then it says idols are no gods. But there are those called gods, and there are those who are gods in heaven and on earth. But to us, there is one God the Father. That's it. Okay, it doesn't need to be figured out. And if you have a problem with Paul saying other gods exist who aren't idols, like the gods who Isaiah and Paul say don't exist, if in spite of Paul referring to the idols in 1 Corinthians 4:8-4-6 as gods who don't exist, and other gods in heaven and earth who do exist, but yet there still being only one God to us, if that's not enough for you to understand all these expressions in the Bible about no other gods besides me, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and you don't understand how all this could be the case, and like Arius and Athanasius and all these willing idiots of the dragon with two horns like a lamb, you don't understand that? Well, it's real simple then. You can go to John 10 and read verses 29 through 36. And right there, you'll see Jesus telling you it's okay. You know what? Trinitarians and others don't follow the Bible. It's okay. It's okay. It doesn't break the scripture. How about that? It's plain as anything else. Jesus said it right there. Why are you upset that I'm calling myself God's son? We're not upset. Well, what work did I do? We're not upset at work. You made yourself a god. Oh, you're upset because I called myself God's son? Guess what? He called the sons of God against whom became gods. So what's your problem? I'm a sent forth son of God. Calling those gods doesn't break the scriptures, Jews who don't follow the scriptures, who don't understand what it means to be a son of God according to the scriptures. It means being a God. It means being a spirit. It means being an only begotten God, like John says of a spirit. Who was with the Father? Who was in the bosom of the Father? Who was in the beginning with the Father? The God, distinguished from him as theos, a God, a son of God, doesn't break the scriptures. Why are you Trinitarians lying? Why are you constantly lying, saying we're polytheists when you're just not following the Bible and lying? Because you're following the dragon, the father of the lie. So it's real simple for you to lie. You can just look at one God, the Father, and lie. You can look at no God but one, the Father, and lie. You can look at Jesus and say, oh, yeah, calling sons of gods doesn't break the scripture, and lie. Yeah, it's real easy to see your associations. You're teaching the very same lies as the dragon, who did all these horrific anti-Christian things right after acting like a beast and did all these anti-Christian things. And now you're going to accept him as a Christian and accept all these anti-Christian things? How about we're not going to do that? How about we're going to go back to the Bible and follow what it says? And when you call us polytheists, we're going to say, oh, you're lying again. Jesus says that doesn't break the scripture. To call sons of God like him gods? Yeah, right there. Hey, guess what? You're a liar. You're following the dragon? Oh, so it's no problem. Just go back to your lying group of people and feel good about yourself. We've got a whole bunch of them now. Yeah, not just Trinitarian either. No, we got a bunch of end-time predictors driving people crazy. And no matter what happens, they're going to go right down with that ship, just like the Trinitarians and others who keep following this dragon. Does that mean every Trinitarian's bad? I don't think so. We'll let the master decide. Does that mean every watchtower person's bad? I don't think so. We'll let the master decide. We're not here to decide. We're here to teach the truth, to look at the facts. And when we do that, it's pretty easy to decide what to believe. Yeah, one God the Father. I'm going to believe that. Yeah, all things out of the Father. Not some things, not all things, and then other things that are exceptions that are made not outside of him. No. No. That's all false doctrine. and easy to defeat because you don't even have any evidence that we have to defeat. We use explicit statements, and if you don't have that, get ready for defeat. So, it's important that we know what we're talking about and what other people are not talking about correctly. When they lie about us, when they lie about God, these things are pretty simple and straightforward. We don't need an emperor killing people in a sign in which he's told to conquer that contradicts how Christians conquer, to tell us what Christians should believe. I don't think we needed Constantine in the Council of Nicaea and this dragon acting like a lamb right after the beast, doing the same things as the non-lamb beast, to tell us several hundred years after the 1 Corinthians 8:6 was written, or the Gospel of John, that God is something else, that he's more than one person. He's consubstantial with other people. Now, no, that's not in the Bible. Let's get back to it and wrap it up. But I've had enough. And we are seeing evidence that I hope is enough to convince people that, look, we have an enemy here. Okay, this is not someone you should take lightly. And if you are careful, you can defeat him. Not with the sign of the cross, but with the blood and testimony of the Lamb. Kelly 2:28. Secondly, as a creature, the Son must have had a beginning. Oh, we already read that. Thirdly, the Son can have no communion with and indeed no direct knowledge of his Father, although he is God's word and wisdom, referring to Arius' view. He is distinct from the word and that wisdom which belong to God's very essence. He is a creature pure and simple and only bears these titles because he participates in the essential word and wisdom. Not really what we believe here, but in himself he is, like all other creatures, alien from and utterly dissimilar to the Father's essence and individual being. We don't believe that. We believe he's an exact copy in the same substance. Everything is out of the Father, okay? So I don't care how far you go from it. Ultimately, it came out of the Father. And Jesus came directly out of the Father. And everything else came directly out of the Father through him. So God is a spirit. Angels are described as spirits. And Jesus is a life-giving spirit. They are not utterly dissimilar to the Father's essence. That is also a false teaching of Arius. Kelly, pages 220 to 229. We're almost done, everyone. Being finite, therefore, and of a different order of existence, he cannot comprehend the infinite God. This is Kelly speaking about Arius' view of Jesus. The Father, Arius remarks, remains ineffable to the Son, and the Word can neither see nor know the Father perfectly and accurately. We don't believe that either. He says no one fully knows the Father but the Son, and no one fully knows the Son but the Father, which excludes the Holy Spirit, by the way. Sorry, no Trinity. But what he knows and sees proportionately to his capacity. Well, in part, that's true, right? The Son can do only what he beholds the Father doing, but he definitely fully knows the Father, and the Father fully knows the Son, to the extent that the Father can be fully known by anyone. At a conference, one of the Arians, surprised by a sudden question, admitted that he might have fallen as the devil fell, and this was what they in their hearts of hearts believed. The official teaching, however, was a tactful modification to this, to the effect that while the Son's nature was in principle peccable, God in his providence foresaw that he would remain virtuous by his own steadfast resolution, and therefore bestowed his grace on him in advance. Right? Just different ways of trying to understand Arius' view, the Arians' view of Jesus. It must be asked in what sense, according to the Arians, the Son could be called God, or was indeed Son of God. Their answer was that these were in fact courtesy titles. Even if he, quote, even if he is called God, wrote Arius, He is not God truly, but by participation in grace, he too is called God in name only. Now, in one sense, if we're talking God like capital God, similar to how the angels are called God, addressed as God, and he's called and addressed as God by Thomas and as the angel of Jah. That is true. But he's also, when it says here, Dada, you got to not make noises now. God in name only, not truly God. Right, he's definitely not seen the kind of divine similarity that we accept for the sons of God that's not true of idols and other, false gods. But the Bible clearly refers to them as having the exact same type of existence. They're spirits, but God is eternal. He's the eternal spirit, the Father. That's how the Bible presents him. It does not present him categorically as different from them existentially in terms of his being, a spirit. This is all later stuff they do to confuse themselves. Literally. And then we get to all this stuff here. Secondly, a creature. We talked about that. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Almost done here, everyone. I just want to give you a clear view of Arius' teaching so you understand what was happening during this time and how he was really not this champion of the Bible that some people kind of think of him as. They were both crazy, all these groups. By this point, they were convulsing doctrinally, okay? They had a pagan emperor as the leader of the church, for crying out loud. I mean, it's just gone. It's over. The dragon is in control and acting like a lamb. And he's got doctrinal convulsions going on, right? They're going crazy. Page 229, Kelly. Arius could speak of the Holy Triad, right? So what? Just because triad, Trinity is used, Arius used the word Trinity, according to Kelly. That doesn't mean he believed in the Trinity, just like with some people before the Council of Nicaea used the word. It's not the same thing, though, necessarily. Arius could speak of the Holy Triad in speciously originistic language as consisting of three persons. Tres hypostases. But the three he envisages are entirely different beings, not sharing in any way the same nature or essence. Okay, that's similar to us. Hebrews 1:3, it's very clear. He's a character of God's hypostases. He's a copy of it. He's an imprint of it. It requires separation. There is no question. There are two hypostases here, okay? They are not sharing the same essence consubstantially like a conjoined human twin, sharing one human body. That's what they mean. Closest analogy. No, they're separate spirits. They're not conjoined spirits. Nothing in the Bible presents them this way. This was the conclusion Arius deduced by the exercise of his ruthless dialectic from his analysis of the concept of agenitas, which literally means ingenerate, but which in current philosophical parlance had come to mean the same as agenitas, i.e. unoriginated or self-existent, the attribute of transcendent deity. In addition, however, the Arians amassed a formidable array of scriptural texts in support of their ideas. Chief among these were passages suggesting that the Son was a creature, Proverbs 8:22 in the Septuagint, the Lord created me, etc. Acts 2:38, God made him Lord in Christ. Romans 8:29, the firstborn among many. Right? So he's not even uniquely that in the sense in which he's firstborn from the dead. He is the firstborn in that sense unique, but he's just like the firstborn in the spiritual sense. If there's a firstborn, there's a secondborn and a thirdborn. It's just the first one born, the beginning of one's generative power. Deuteronomy 32:17, I believe, defined several times in Deuteronomy, right? Not a mystery, no confusion, always temporal, even in figurative uses. Firstborn, that is. Other text areas used representing God the Father as the sole veritable God. Classic example being John 17:3, which we all know very well. A third category of text areas used seem to imply Christ's inferiority to the Father, notably John 14:28. Lastly, a host of passages about attributes of ignorance, weakness, suffering related to the Son of God. Arius had, of course, discarded certain of Origen's ideas, notably his doctrine of eternal generation. All right, let's read this last part, page 231. The theology of Nicaea. Teaching like this, going far beyond Dionysius of Alexandria's most unguarded statements and verging, as Athanasius was quick to note, on polytheism, stood little chance of proving acceptable to the East, much less in the West. Nevertheless, Arius was able to hold his own for a few years. His bishop, Alexander, as we should expect, came out strongly against him. But after the capitulation of Licinius in 324, Constantine turned his attention to the affair, this whole controversy related to Nicaea, determined to reestablish doctrinal unity in the church. This is Kelly 231. By this time, the uneasiness of the Eastern episcopate as a whole was becoming obvious, and the sympathies of Osius, the emperor's ecclesiastical confidant, whose standpoint was thoroughly Western, were not likely to lie with Arius. His tenets were anathematized at a synod held under Osius's chairmanship at Antioch in early 325, and Eusebius of Caesarea was placed under provincial excommunication at the same time. A few months later, in June, the ecumenical council, which Constantine had planned, met at Nicaea. From the negative point of view, there can be no doubt, page 232, that what the attitude was. Arianism, it is clear at any rate in its original form, outlined in the previous section, was placed under a decisive ban. The Son, the Creed states emphatically, is begotten, not made. Right, so they're making a big distinction here at the Council of Nicaea between these terms, which in the Bible, there's no difference in terms of temporality, okay, as I've shown. And I challenge anybody to show any example of poieo, ganao, or katizo that's not temporal. Okay, you can save your time. It doesn't exist. It's ridiculous to even create this discussion. It's the dragon we're talking about. He's confuses people. He's a liar. He gets people confused to the point where they start acting like the beast and killing people, forcing them to be a Christian or be burned alive. Okay, these are the doctrines we're getting in association with all this stuff, this ridiculous distinction between terms that ultimately make no difference. They're just different ways of the same thing. If God makes Adam out of the earth, or he makes Eve out of Adam's rib, or Cain is born after being begotten in Eve by Adam, they're all temporal. And guess what? They're all called creations in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even our spiritual birth is referred to as a new creation. And yet we're born again. So this is all a fantasy that people have come up with to just make sense of things, right? Like they all freaked out over polytheism. They don't understand the text calling the sons of God, God, like Jesus, don't break the scripture. He literally tells them that. But he also tells them you don't need an oath, and they make one anyway. They don't listen to him, everybody. They're following the dragon. That's why they're doing all these things and doing the opposite of what Christians are told to do. In so many ways, right? We're almost done. Thank you for joining me. Much more difficult to determine in its positive teaching. The Creed supplies some hints stating that as begotten, the Son is out of the Father's substance, and that he is of the same substance as the Father. We know that these phrases, the latter owed its insertion to Constantine's express wish page 233, caused embarrassment at the council to the Origenistic majority represented by Eusebius, and in his letter to the Caesarean church, he records the interpretation he was prepared to put upon them. And then he tries to explain, right, because they're humiliated by Constantine's use of a non-biblical term that is not Christian. But here they are, right, being hosted by the dragon. Page 234, our final part. But if this is granted, a further question at once arises. Are we to understand of the same nature in the generic sense in which Origen was alleged to have employed homoousios, or are we to take it as having the meaning accepted by later Catholic theology, namely numerical identity of substance? That's what they mean by homoousios and Constantine's use of it at the Council of Nicaea, not earlier uses. They mean of the same substance. Like he says right here, the root word ousia could signify the kind of substance or stuff common to several individuals of a class, or it could connote an individual thing as such. That's it right there. That's the difference between us. We all have separate ousias, essences, even though we have the same essence in terms of the category or type, right? Human, flesh. Spirits have the same thing. They're spirits. They have the same nature as the other in the sense of being spirits. They're not sharing the same essence like you and I would be if we were a conjoined twin, okay? A Siamese twin. Those are the two uses. Two individual ousias or essences, two human beings, two spirits, or one that in the case of the Trinity is a conjoinment of three. None of this is related to the Bible. It's all this wild philosophy that is not biblical. If it's philosophy that's biblical, great, but it's not. It's talking about even Arius, right? They're presenting time as something you can be born outside of, right? Like events, things that happen sequentially to others, born, not born, are happening somewhere where there's no measure. You can't measure one in relation to the other because you're not in time. Yeah. So when you weren't born, but now you're born, there's no time there because you're not in time. Yeah, you're out. There's this place, this thing that they invent. They reify. Reify means to give existence to something that doesn't exist. Like it would be like taking an abstraction. Like love, right? And saying it's a real thing, not just an abstract feeling you have. Like some big physical heart, you know. That's what they do. So they create an understanding that confuses people about the nature of God and how Jesus can be a son of God. These questions keep people in continuous confusion and have since this time. Specifically, right? A little bit before as well and leading up to it, but it's like the persecutions by the Romans before Nero, right? There's a difference here. Now we have the state enforcing religion and doctrine and even contributing terms that redefine the doctrine to go from one God the Father to one God who shares the essence with more than one person. And the Son is one of them, who is now eternal because he's born outside of time. Something that's not in the Bible. The Bible wouldn't make, that's just not even a concept, right? Everything born in the Bible is temporal. Time is not a place. God's not in time or out of time. That's just an invention. They're just inventing that, everybody. Show me a text in the Bible where it says time is an actual place or a thing like a river that you're in and you can go back and forward. No, it's not. It's a measurement of events, thoughts, and positions and places and people relative to the same means of measurement. In our case, the sun, moon, and stars and our position on the earth as they all work together in predictable manner. And it's the same with God. And so they just invent these things. That's why they take John 1:1 as teaching Jesus is eternal. Oh, he's with God in the beginning. Yeah, he's outside of time there. No, it says, well, first of all, it says he's in the beginning. Beginning is temporal by definition. And secondly, that's the physical beginning of Genesis 1, where even the other sons of God are, according to Job 38 and Psalm 8. So again, it's all non-biblical. They just invent these ideas. And they try to piggyback on different philosophies, whether it's Greek philosophy or modern science, that misidentifies theoretically dimensions or things like space as time. That's not time. What time is it? Oh, okay, there's time right there. What are you talking about? That's what the Bible's talking about. When you say, what time is it? And I tell you it's 9:30 California time, that's what the Bible means. I guarantee it. Every time it's talking about time, that's what it's talking about. The time it is relative to the sun, moon, and stars and our existence relative to them. And the events that happen in sequence with each other relative to them. And the measurements that can be laid down over all of that to show when they took place relative to each other. Okay? So you can say whatever you want, just like eternal generation. You can come up with the most bizarre and retarded things ever. They are ridiculous, and they're just an excuse for you not to believe the Bible. You can say whatever you want about polytheism, sons of God. This is just an excuse for you to keep following the dragon and not inconvenience your life like people who believe the Bible. Okay, we believe explicit, clear teachings. We don't believe all this later stuff that came about through a pagan emperor who lied about this dream and how Christians conquer and was lauded like the wild beast. Are you crazy? Setting up images to the first beast, the false gods, and all these successive Christian emperors that went way overboard and incited the heathen against the Christians, which were not to do. We weren't told to go kill them and burn them alive. These are all symptoms of a dragon empire using the Christ to try to deceive the seed of the woman. Just like Jesus said might happen unless those days were cut short, mislead, if possible, even the chosen ones. The dragon's trying to do it. It's all he tries to do. He's a dragon. Look for where people are dying. Look at where people are lying. I guarantee you, you find those two things or even one of them. But if you find both of them, lying and the dying, like we see with Constantine and the Christian emperors thereafter, and the radical redefinition of Christology, theology, and how Christian religion would be enforced now by the state, and to such extremes as to hate heathens in a way we're not told to kill them and torture them. It's one thing to hate their beliefs and views or some of their practices, but to actually want to kill them? No, we're not told to do that. I mean, even if they were told to do that in the Old Testament, we're not told to do that in the New. If only Constantine knew. And of course, if he really wanted to, he would have. And many people could have told him and probably did. But that's not what he presented. None of the things associated with Constantine, other than his toleration of some level, the horns the dragon's using to lie, to deceive people. That's the trick. He's getting you to see, oh, it's not so bad. Look, now we can all be Christians. Now we'll have our theology enforced by the state. Now we're going to persecute and torture people who don't agree with our false doctrine, whether it's Arius or Athanasius or anything but one God the Father and the sons of God as gods who do not break the scripture. Yeah. That's what's taught in the Bible.